Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Cindy Bloom.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of December 15th, and this is your Monday briefing.
So, Scott, we have a bit to get through today, but we are winding towards the end of the year.
Sure.
And could you talk about what's happening this week?
Sure, Cindy. So the House and Senate are in session this week as lawmakers wrap up their year-end work. The House may take up healthcare legislation after the Senate recently failed to move forward on its own bill, which could shape healthcare policy discussions going into 2026. On Wednesday, the Joint Economic Committee will hold a hearing on how to realign healthcare incentives to improve outcomes and lower costs. We also expect to see jobs numbers this week, possibly showing data going all the way back to October in the effort to catch up from the government shutdown. And finally, on everyone's radar, the Pillar 2 side-by-side. Last week, some countries, including Estonia, raised objections that could slow final approval. Even so, U.S. officials have said the goal remains to reach an agreement before year-end.
A lot going on as we wind down the year. Today, we have an interview with Sarah Haradon, who recently joined PwC from the Treasury Department. Pat Brown sat down with Sarah to get her insight on current and future guidance. Here's their conversation.
Sarah, welcome to PwC and your first time on Policy on Demand.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Delighted to have you here. So what kinds of questions have you been getting from folks since you left?
Primarily, honestly, CAMT.
Of course. Top of mind for a lot of people.
Top of mind, and obviously more so top of mind with the changes under OB3. So I led I supervised the last set of Internal Revenue Bill, the notices that have come out since the new year or since the inauguration.
Right.
I think, this week I've gotten when we understand there's going to be another notice, when is it going to be released?
Yes.
I heard a rumor that it's still being tweaked, which means, for those of us that know how the process works, means we're not going to see it this week.
Right.
We probably won't see it next week because it's not that far along.
Right.
Or it still has quite a ways to go, let's put
Yes.
it that way, in the clearance process. I've been asked a lot, what will it include?
Right.
I think there's a lot of speculation about 174, whether it'll
Yes.
include 174 or not. I'm guessing like anyone else.
Right.
Maybe they'll give some relief on the transition election.
Yeah.
It's been a hot political issue lately,
Yeah.
obviously. I think they'll probably include, maybe there's been some commentary on the repairs and expenses piece, that maybe they missed that a little bit from a technical perspective or a breadth perspective. So I've been asked that a lot about CAMT. And also, I think, when to expect more technical guidance.
Yeah.
It was the intent of those notices that they were high level,
Right.
Of course, right? You're
Yes.
doing an interim piece of guidance
Yeah.
that is supposed to sort of stop the bleeding, so to speak, as quickly as possible, but not, address things like more nuanced issues
Right.
like CAMT basis or something, for example, right?
So signal a change in direction, but obviously a lot of
Yeah.
details have to come behind that.
Yeah, and part of the question of when we will see that guidance goes simultaneous to what the conversation we just had about the staffing and who's left that worked on the proposed regulations, but also the priorities that are coming before that. But
Yeah.
so I wouldn't expect we would see that until at the earliest, the end of next year,
Yeah.
frankly. And then I've been asked about other deregulatory initiatives. Some of those have come to fruition since I've been at PwC, such as stock buybacks. We saw last week that basis shifting, the withdrawal of the transaction of interest,
Right.
finally went to OIRA. I've been asked, does that mean anything? No. The new memorandum of understanding that they executed with OIRA
Right.
just says OIRA can review whatever it wants. And
Right.
I think that's probably just a
Right. So it's a
standard
procedural
review.
step in getting whatever the guidance is out of the building, but it doesn't necessarily signal anything about what's in it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People question why it's taken so long to get out. I'm guessing I would say it's just priorities and what else they have on their plate.
Right.
I've been asked kind of generally about the deregulatory initiative and if it's not on the priority guidance plan, if it was removed from the priority guidance plan, can we still ask for it? Right. So there might be something that you actually really need guidance on to provide some more certainty. And the answer is yes, definitely yes. I think this administration is, in my view, very open to, to hearing those concerns and to sort of working around them or working with them, I should say. So yes, I would encourage, I'm encouraged. Yes, if there's something you really think you need, this isn't.
Well, let's talk a little bit more, Sarah, about the Priority Guidance Plan, because you touched on that. As we look at it and compare it to past Priority Guidance Plans, it looks a little different.
Yes.
Fewer items on it.
Yeah.
Emphasis on deregulation, as you already noted. So what are some of the things that you would advise people as you look at that with your kind of trained eye? What are some of your takeaways as you think about the guidance plan?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is OB3 is the priority, and everyone knows that. But going back to the conversation we just had about limited resources, they are already working around the clock to get the OB3 guidance out. And I really don't think we should expect much more from the guidance perspective until that is done. And they are getting pressure from the White House, I'm sure, on a daily basis to do that in a very timely manner. So that's the first thing I would say, which is be patient on anything else that you might see on there that you want issued. The second thing I would say is, they really want stakeholder input on the deregulatory initiative. And, there might be a line item that says 163J as applied to partnerships. They're looking for stakeholders to help them with that, to help them with specifically what works, what doesn't, ideas for making it deregulatory. I will say the IRA, the process I was involved in with the IRA guidance, when we did notices asking for stakeholder input in advance, of issuing the guidance were extremely helpful, just to help think through what are the issues people need to be resolved. And I would say if there are issues, if there are ideas that are not on the guidance plan, because it's a short time period for when they ask for ideas between when they actually issue it, let them know that they are, as I said, they've been very vocal about being open to stakeholder input as to what should be on that initiative list and what it should look like. And second to that, back to the other question I answered it earlier, is I think if there's actually guidance that is not deregulatory that people want, I still think there's I still think, assuming it's helpful to the economy, or they can make some colorful argument in that way, I still think it's a possibility. Yeah,
I'm just going to double down. So this point about stakeholder input and the value of stakeholder input, I think a lot of times folks in the taxpayer community don't understand the extent to which those of you or me who served in government, how starved you are for understanding of specific fact patterns and specific applications of principles. And so that input is really invaluable. And I think sometimes to taxpayers' detriment, we don't get in front of the government often enough to say, let me explain to you how this hits in the real world. Not assuming that they understand that point, is really a key thing.
And back to your question about the questions I've been asked since I started, some of them are they just going to go and withdraw these regulations that we think are helpful? The answer is no, they're not. They want this to be a helpful process. They want this to be helpful for taxpayers and businesses and the economy. And no, they're not, especially if you tell them not to do it, right?
Exactly. All the more reason to let them know. So I'm going to ask you one more question, Sarah, on the theme of the deregulatory initiative, something that you talked about and is obviously, as you noted, featured in the guidance plan, this concept of deregulation. But you touched on one aspect of deregulation, maybe not necessarily being a great thing. Are they going to remove favorable guidance? But also, if you're in a sort of deregulatory environment, maybe you just have less guidance overall. And so how do you think, how should taxpayers be thinking about that in terms of this trade-off between maybe not as many detailed rules, but does that mean less certainty? Does it mean more potential for controversy? Maybe talk a little bit about your thoughts around that.
I definitely think it leaves us in a place of more uncertainty. Just full stop. Whether that is an opportunity or a detriment depends on how you're looking at it and what the facts are. And is it an industry that needs a will-level opinion, or is it a industry where, or is it a fact pattern that, there's a lot more room for interpretation, Or there's less, you need less certainty, I should have put it that way. I think there was a concern it could result in a, quote, race to the bottom, I've only been back in the private sector now about a month, but I haven't seen that yet. I think there's still audits going on. There's still, the IRS is still, examining things. It does, though, I think it leaves us in a more uncertain position for a lot of very technical guidance. Specifically, I'm in the partnership space that's been proposed for, going over a decade at this point, and some of it. And that inevitably might lead to more audits if they have the personnel to do that. And everybody thinks, I think everyone agrees that the courts aren't necessarily a great way to make tax law. But whether or not things actually reach that stage too is, I think, less likely these days. But so, I think we'll have to be determined.
It's hard to argue against the desire for certainty. I guess in thinking about this issue myself, but also in listening to your response, Sarah, you're sort of left with this notion of everybody wants certainty, but what's the right way to achieve it? And it's not necessarily the case that more prescriptive rules will always deliver more certainty.
I agree.
They will deliver more rules, but will that mean more certainty? And obviously people can debate that endlessly, and there's not necessarily a clear right answer.
And what if there's anything I did learn in the government, it's, yes, but can I have some more? So you do something, and immediately it's either pointing out what you didn't include, or they're asking for additional, or they just don't want it to begin with. So, but so many different stakeholder, just inputs, I think, in that process.
So we're going to have to leave it there.
Great.
Thank you, Sarah, again for joining us. And again, welcome aboard. It's great to have you here as part of the team.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. It's been great to be here.
In case you missed it, attached in the show notes is the latest Week in Review with Carl Russo. And beginning December 23rd, we're on winter break, and we'll be back on January 5th.
We have a special episode next Monday with some of our specialists looking back at this year and what tax policy developments will mean for 2026. You won't want to miss that. Thank you, as always, for spending this time with us, and take care.